Thank you.
Well, when she calls, there's no. I told her, I said, I did this before. She said, I know it, but the wheel rolls around and you're up again. So I had to change some of my plans. I really don't know what is on your mind in the way of what you expect. So I'm going to hit some highlights of what I did, and then if you got questions, maybe I could answer. Yeah, she's right. I did start sweeping floors in my uncle's garage, and that was a very good job, $4 a week. We don't even think about that now. We think about that as not even minimum wage. But in 1943, when we were in war, my uncle got a notice to report for draft going to the Army. He was elder, he was a little older, you know, than most people were, all the young people of age that got there, but his wife had to have an emergency appendectomy and she died during the operation. So as a result, he had to sell his garage and move to Hazen, Arkansas and become a farmer. They said, we won't make you go in the Army if you'll get a war-related activity. So that put me, I got up to $12 a week. That was about the third year I'd done that. And I don't know how many of you have ever experienced some of these things, but if you had any kind of skill in the automobile business, everybody would hire you. And I had more offers to go to work for dealerships than I could choose. And I chose one company. I always liked Chevrolets better than I did Fords. My uncle was a Ford man. I was always a Chevrolet man. But I went to work for this Chevrolet dealer. And in fact, I had my 15th birthday in August that year after I'd gone to work with them. But working there for a long time, you know, automobile dealers are kind of bad at times. I thought he wanted me to stay in the parts and the service department all the time because, you know, you get standard pay there. I was wanting to sell, and I kept trying to get them to give me a job selling, and they wouldn't do it. So then I said, well, I'll just go in the insurance business. And they said, oh, you ain't gonna quit. I did. I went in the insurance business, and it wasn't long they called me and said, Harold, come back. And I came back to the dealership, and I hired 2 people to run the insurance agency that I had. And I guess if you think of anything, using people, I mean, you can't use them. You got to pay them, but using people is the only way you can expand. And as a result of that, I stayed there for a long time, but these guys got where they'd rather go drink beer and play dominoes than work, and so I told them that I was going to quit again. I had to go run that insurance agency. When I did that, they said, well, you can't quit. We'll give you a leave of absence to go close it down, and then you come back. But during that leave of absence, the man who owned the dealership or ran the dealership along with, he had a doctor who was his uncle that had half the dealership because it originally was known as Crite Johnson Motor Company rather than just Crite. He called me and asked me, Harold, how would you like to be the dealer in Jacksonville, Arkansas? Well, you know, when you're in your 20s, you think, and I said, I would love it, but I don't have any money. And he looked at me and he said, did I ask you about money? I said, no, sir. He said, how would you like to be the dealer? And I said, yes, sir. So he told me to go see these other 2 people that were going to have a decision and who got that, and I went over and visited with them, and I did put on a tie that day, Larry. I look pretty good. Now, see, he always gets on me. He don't see me in long pants much at Rotary Club, and he sometimes makes me stand up in a chair so that everybody can see I'm in shorts, and I tell him what time the tea time is, and I'm fixing to leave. But I saw these other two men, and somehow or other, on November the 7th of 1957, I got a letter from Chevrolet that said, you're the new dealer in Jacksonville, and these are the things you got to do. Now, I don't know how you would be when you think about that. I probably could, if I sold my house and took the equity, I might be able to come up with $8,000 or $10,000. You know, I hadn't amassed any. And then when they told me to go buy real estate to build a dealership building, it was kind of tough. I was wondering, if I go out there and sign my name to a deal, I'm going to buy this, where am I going to get any money? But I did it. I went on faith. And March 28th, 1958, we opened that dealership. We'd had it completely built. The cost of doing business back then was a little bit different than what it is today. You couldn't buy the front door to or front showroom for the $60,000 that we put into that business to start it, and that was building the building. Of course, we had a mortgage on the building, but that's where I started from. I found out pretty quick when you give up on city council pay, and you give up all these other things. My wife worked for the state, and she was in the tax department. She had a salary, and you know, we were just two young kids, and had just had a grandson. Our grandson's daddy, Russell, was born, and you know, we had a hard time for a while, but somehow or other, all that worked out, and I said, I've got to do something to increase my income. So I started looking at ways to do it. So I bought a school that had been vacant for 3 years and turned it into an apartment complex. And then I ended up buying a Ramada Inn franchise. I think we were the 16th Ramada chain in the Ramada chain. We had another spot that we could sell to an oil company on that piece of property, and so I was coming in from Walnut Ridge one night, getting along about 12 o'clock, and I was thinking about how can I buy this dealership where it's all mine. And so I went back to my partner that I'd gotten into the real estate business with, and I said, Bart, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you'll give me all the money off the sale of that oil company, I'll give you the apartment complex. He said, well, I'll do that. So then I went to my stockholders and I said, this, on the basis of what we're doing, at the end of 5 years, this is what the business would be, and I'd like to buy you out on the basis of what it'd be worth 5 years from now, and be my own man. That's the only way I could get a raise, because I only made $500 a month back then. But at any rate, I'm telling you that was a hard time when you try to figure out how you're going to get on the move and do things. As you remember, Little Rock Air Force Base came into Jacksonville. It opened in 1954. But there was a real need for a place to live out there. So I started building other apartments. And then other people started building other apartments because mine were all filled. They wanted to get in on it too. Then I sold my ex-partner my share of that. Everybody was complaining about the banks, that we only had one bank. So I said, well, I'll get you one. And you never know when you do something for somebody what's going to come back. But this particular deal, boy was a lawyer on the House Ways and Means Committee, but his first job, I hired him to come to the dealership at crates and take inventory. I'd get some of the high school boys to come down, and we'd just count parts and give numbers. As a result of that, I called Pat and I said, Pat, I'd like for you to go get me an application for a national bank and just keep it quiet up there. Don't tell them who it is. So we did it, and after I got it all organized, we filed an application, and we had a little rebuttal from the Fed because the man that owned the other bank was chairman of the Federal Reserve Board in St. Louis. And his name was Raymond Rebsman, and he died here in Memphis, but he was a great man too. I always appreciated him. I sometimes see him at the Little Rock Country Club. I'd be driving a Cadillac and he'd be driving a Lincoln. I said, what's the matter? Is that Ford not good enough for you? And he said, well, what are you doing in that Cadillac? Is that Chevrolet not good enough for you? You know, but it was all in fun. But at any rate, we got that bank. Now from the bank, I'd already been associated with insurance companies, and one of the primary things that we do in the insurance companies is look at it from the aspect of what we do in the automobile business that produces that, and we have offshore companies that do that, but that's just another thing. But in 1989, Chevrolet wanted my son to come to Memphis, and so Russell came over as the dealer here. The banking business was getting ready, that everybody was merging, so I decided instead of taking the merger, I'd saw some people take cash and take stock. Those that take stock, sometimes the new crew comes in and runs the bank down, and some of them are broke, and we've had that experience with people in Memphis that I knew. So I decided what I would do is just sell the bank. So I sold the bank, and we became more into the automobile industry. We've done a lot of things, but that's what brought me here in '89. I didn't move here until '90, and then 2.5 years ago, my son was chairman of the Democratic Party in Arkansas, and he was down at the headquarters, and some of you knew about that, but he was murdered, and I had to go back to work after I'd already kind of said no. That's kind of bad. But then I went back to, when I went back to Little Rock, I had to close 2 dealerships. I had to buy one, and that wasn't easy. But now you've heard what I had to say, and here I am. I'm in my 80s, and I'm happy. I talked to Dr. Scott Morris one day this week, he'd called me about something, and I told him I was going to be here, and he said, well, I'm going to come hear you, but I say he left. I told him he didn't need to hear what I had to say. But anyhow, if you want to ask me about something, you can do it. I guess I didn't say much about my military experience. One of the reasons I they didn't want to lose that cheap labor they had at the Chevrolet company, so they told me, you need to join the Guard so you won't have to go to this mandatory 2 years active duty. Didn't want to lose it. But so I joined the Guard. The Korean War came along. Certain people with certain rank and certain qualifications, they give them a direct commission, and I qualified, and so I said, I'd like to do that. So I ended up being a second lieutenant, and that went on. You know, everybody asked me, is anything exciting happening in your life about that? Yeah, I've had a lot of fun with the fact that Colin Powell was a colonel when I was a brigadier and was the 101st. You know, that's pretty good. I mean, but boy, he bypassed me in a hurry. But one of the things that I guess, I don't know why he took a liking to me, other than there was a 4-star coming to see me, and Colin was with me, and they lost all radio contact. So they called me on my radio and said, you know, when this party arrives, would you please have him call this number at the White House? And Colin said, Harold, what are they doing? And I said, they're going to name him Chief Staff of the Army today. No, they don't do that. Because he had served in protocol in the White House when everything was done, just certain orders and go through it. So when I hit the airport before he did, and when his airplane landed, I was in a chopper. And when his plane landed, I told him, I said, General, I'd played golf with him up in Virginia, you know, and when he got out of the plane, he was almost like we'd just finished playing golf again. So I said, well, I got a sedan here, I got an office where you can sit down and call. You need to call this number at the White House. So he called, and he was told at 10 o'clock today, the president's going to name you the Chief Staff of the Army. So we got on the chopper, and anytime you go in a Huey, you know that whoever the senior ranking officer, he's going to sit on the right, next one sits next to him, and you go right on down. So Colin sat on the left of me, he sat on the right, and he kept watching his watch, and as soon as it got close to 10 o'clock, then he looked at me, looked at this. As soon as it got right on 10, he said, Harold, the President is announcing me as the Chief of Staff Designate of the Army. And I turned around to Colin and I said, Colin, they just named him Chief of Staff of the Army. He said, I don't believe it. But after we got to where we were going, the General told everybody about it, and Colin believed it. But I always kidded him about his politics. And I remember when he wrote his book, he also put a picture in there with him and this 4-star. It was kind of funny. But anyhow.